This is Addicon Podfic, back with another podfic. Today I will be reading The Coral Palace by I Did It for the Lol, and this will be Chapter 11, The Earthshaker's Wrath. Let's get right into it. When Annabeth woke up early the next morning, she thought camp was under attack. The daughter of Athena had slept poorly through the night, periodically startling herself awake to check for messages on her phone and look to see if an iris message depicting messy black hair and a crooked smile was hovering somewhere around her. The night went on, and she grew increasingly worried each time she discovered that Percy had not reached out. The final time she woke, she knew that was the last rest she would be getting for a while. Screams rang out, sending her adrenaline and heart pumping as she opened her eyes and shot to her feet. Annabeth didn't remain standing for long, however, as the ground beneath her shook violently and sent her to her knees. Annabeth braced her hands against the floor as the earth trembled, a few framed pictures making their way off the dresser in the cabin and falling against the floor. The glass shattered loudly, and Annabeth turned her head to see out the back cabin door that had swung open. Through the loud rumbling of the earth shifting beneath her, Annabeth could see the ocean in the distance. It was dark and stormy, gale-force winds bending trees beyond the camp boundary nearly sideways. The waves crashed against the shore, large enough to take out a house, and sent the water into a flurry of white foam. After a few moments, the shaking slowly began to cease, and Annabeth pulled herself to her feet and propped herself up against the bed as it fully receded. The ocean still stood firm in its rage, water slamming into the windows of the cabin as rain hammered down around camp. Annabeth's eyes widened. Something terrible had happened. Poseidon, Earthshaker, Stormbringer, Lord of the Seas, was angry. She had a feeling as to why. Without a second thought, Annabeth tore out of the cabin, sprinting past the other campers who were emerging from their cabins, faces twisting in terror and confusion. She paid them no mind, heart pounding in her chest as she ran past towards the big house. She could see the other cabin counselors following behind her, but Annabeth knew she needed to get to Chiron. As she finally approached the big house porch, she spotted the immortal trainer of heroes ducking out of the doorway with a grim expression. Thunder and lightning roared overhead, wind whipping through the trees as a torrential downpour unleashed over camp. Nymphs and satyrs were running around like mad, nature spirits standing out in the weather, staring at the ocean intently. "Chiron!" Annabeth yelled, skidding to a stop in front of the centaur. Her chest was heaving, and she heard others behind her. "What happened? Who is it?" The daughter of Athena gasped out, eyes wide. Chiron shook his head, feet stomping anxiously behind him. "Get the counselors inside. We need to talk," Chiron said gravely, eyes glancing back towards the water. Annabeth's breath caught in her throat. Come on, Annabeth. Let's get out of the rain," Katie said behind her, gently grasping her shoulder. It shot the daughter of Athena out of her temporary daze, and together the demigods trudged inside, still dripping water out of their clothes. Annabeth shivered as she moved towards her usual seat, suddenly spotting 3 figures standing near the back of the room. With a start, she recognized it to be Apollo, Hermes, and Rachel, gathered in a small trio near the head of the table. Rachel was silent, eyes wide and unfocused as she stared at the floor in front of her. Hermes and Apollo didn't even glance up at the demigods who entered, muttering in hushed tones to each other. Time seemed to slow down around her as she sat down in her usual spot, noticing the painting of Xanthus was still set in Percy's vacant chair. Percy wasn't back yet. Poseidon was enraged. What had happened? Had he been hurt? Killed? Possibilities raced through her mind, her ears ringing and blocking out the noise of the other campers calling for answers around her. Finally, something broke through Annabeth's haze, a hand gripping her shoulder tightly. Jumping slightly, she looked up to see Nico standing next to her, a grim expression on his face. Her heart beat faster, opening her mouth to ask the question she didn't know if she wanted the answer to, but the son of Hades beat her to it. "He's not dead. I would know," Nico told her firmly. Annabeth paused, blinking slowly as the information was processed by her mind. "Then what happened?" she finally asked, after her voice returned to her. Chiron cleared his throat, and the demigods went quiet, turning to their mentor for answers. "Early this morning, Rachel came to wake me. Apollo had come to inspect the painting we showed you last night and determined it was an interpretation of what has occurred in the past few days," Chiron announced gravely, Annabeth's eyes widening. "Xanth has been captured?" the daughter of Athena asked, horror mounting in her mind. Chiron's frown deepened. "The situation is more complicated than we originally anticipated. After Lord Apollo made his determination, I attempted to contact all the Atlantean royal family and was unable to do so. I then contacted Lord Hermes, who went personally to Atlantis to determine what had happened," Chiron said, gesturing towards the gods and messengers. "The details are still being determined at this point, but here's what we know so far," Hermes said, stepping forward so the demigods could see him better. The god was dressed in a black mortal tracksuit, complete with a Nike headband. His codices was currently in the form of a smartphone clutched in his hand. He looked as grim as the rest of them, glancing back at his brother behind him before continuing. I arrived at Atlantis this morning and discovered several small skirmishes being dealt with by Atlantean warriors. I approached my uncle and informed him about how messages had not been able to get through anywhere underwater, and also let him know about the painting of Xanth. Hermes relayed, wincing slightly. He quickly set off for the Coral Palace to check on her personally, and I accompanied him. When we arrived, the city was warded with powerful and old magic, essentially sending out a "Don't Look Over Here" broadcast that kept attention off the palace. The city was practically destroyed, and Poseidon dispatched a few remaining hordes of monsters left behind to guard it. The captured Atlantean commanders we recovered relayed that communications had been cut off nearly a week prior, and that Xanth had fallen in combat nearly 3 days ago. The soldiers did not see what became of her after she took a powerful blow, but that is when the armies fully unleashed upon them and overtook their forces. The demigods gasped, turning to look and whisper with one another. Annabeth's heart pounded in her chest. If communications had been cut off for over a week, then how has Atlantis and Percy been communicating with Xanth this whole time? The daughter of Athena asked sharply. Percy had been texting back and forth with his sisters all week, including the previous day. How had Xanth been unable to call for help from any of them? Someone cast a separate spell over the palace, essentially sending out auto-replies to messages about their status. Someone powerful must have cast it in order to make the replies seem somewhat genuine, but after further review, there are slight discrepancies that match up with the timeline given to us by the soldiers. Hermes replied, shaking his head. But those weren't the only discrepancies we found. It was shortly after this that we realized a similar pattern had followed Chemopilia's messages the past 2 days. The god of messengers said darkly. No, Piper said softly, eyes widening at the realization flooding across the room. Hermes nodded sagely. Unfortunately, yes. Chemopilia's palace was in a similar disarray, her captured guards offering a small story. Nobody was able to leave the city grounds once the spell was enacted, and Chemopilia fell in combat sometime last night. They don't know what became of her afterwards. Hermes told them, a bone-chilling shiver rushing down Annabeth's spine. The text from Percy last night, the feeling she had about it, horror rushed into her mind as she braced her hands forwards on the table in front of her. It caught Apollo's attention, who moved around the table by her side. The god swiftly kneeled down to be just below eye level for her. The god was dressed in a light green sweatshirt and jeans, looking at her intently with piercing blue eyes. What is it? He asked her in a serious tone. She shook her head. Percy went to Atlantis last night to speak with his father. I got a text from him. Something didn't feel right about it, but I assumed it was because there was a lot going on, Annabeth said slowly, realization dawning on Apollo's face. Annabeth, Percy wasn't there this morning. His father assumed he was here at camp. It's only a few minutes ago Carmen told us where he went last night. Hermes said softly, looking at her with a grave expression. No, Annabeth said firmly, a desperate edge to her voice. No, Nico said he's not dead, she snapped quickly, eyes in the room turning towards the son of Hades, who nodded in agreement. Then I fear the worst, and he too has been taken. I'll need to inform Poseidon. I'd brace your campers in case I can't persuade him to control his temper in regards to the camp, Hermes said quickly, nodding to Chiron as he disappeared. The centaur quickly told the other counselors to go to their cabins and warn them of the possibility there would be another earthquake soon. Piper volunteered to warn the Athena cabin in Annabeth's stead. Soon, Annabeth, Nico, Chiron, Rachel, and Apollo remained in the rec room, a heavy silence falling over them as they waited for the messenger god to return. 10 hours earlier. Percy honestly didn't know where he was. He blew the conch shell, as he had been previously instructed, but had not appeared inside Atlantis as he had expected. He materialized somewhere he had never seen before, miles of dark, murky water above him. He frowned, looking around to try and determine how this had happened. The shell had disappeared from his hands entirely, and was nowhere around that he could see. In fact, he couldn't see much of anything, with how dark the waters were around him. In his immediate vicinity, he could faintly spot the ocean floor beneath him, covered in rocky sand and other debris. What confirmed him even further was the lack of sea life around him. Normally by now, a school of fish would have swam by, or a shark would make a brief appearance. Percy swam forward slightly, looking around and not seeing a single bit of aquatic life anywhere in his field of vision. Alarm bells that had already been going off in his head got louder. A pit worry settled in his gut. The ocean was filled with billions of life forms, from sea spirits down to even sea cucumbers. To spot nothing sent Percy's mind racing. Was he even near Atlantis? The pull he typically felt when underwater was hauntingly absent. Atlantis was a bit like Olympus, moving as the times changed to where it was best suited. Once he had started looking for it, Percy could feel the call of the capital to him at any time, knowing precisely how to get there. But now, nothing. Dad, Triton, I'm not sure where I am. Are you close? Percy broadcasted mentally, reaching out to see if he could feel a familiar presence. Empty silence followed his words, and Percy swallowed thickly. His adrenaline was now pumping, and he began using the currents to push himself to the surface. Patting his pockets, he found Riptide and his phone, where, both still present, The Hephaestus campers had outdone themselves once again with perfectly waterproof phones, and his father had given the schematics to the Cyclops, who managed to create a phone that could even withstand immense pressure at the bottom of the sea. Despite his phone functioning underwater, it was far from the palace. He rarely could catch a signal, as phone towers were a very new thing to be introduced underwater, and so far only the main palaces had one. Percy believed the home of the royal family had been updated first. Likely the reason why was to give Percy another way to contact them if needed, but it had come in handy a few times before Percy had managed to get a handle on communicating telepathically with his family. The water parted around him as he shot upwards, racing the miles towards the surface at rapid speed. He was still probably 700 or 800 meters away when a chill went down his spine, and he felt himself look over his right shoulder before he even registered why. Approaching with shocking silence and an insane speed for the size of them, were two of the creatures Xanth had fought in his dream. The shark-like jaws of the first one opened, now less than 200 feet from him. It let out a bone-shaking roar that had all the hairs on Percy's skin standing upright. He pulled Riptide from his pocket, uncapping it to full size as he pushed the currents faster. He was hoping to breach the water before they could reach him. His plan quickly changed as the creatures moved even faster, now nearly on top of him. He redirected his eyes on the creatures and his blade raised. The first one was maybe 20 feet back now, but closing in fast. Realizing there was no chance of outrunning them, he quickly tried to narrow down a strategy for how to defeat them. They were massive, and despite sounding exactly like something he would try, he was not willing to be swallowed in order to try and kill it from the inside. This blade was small in comparison to the monsters before him. The 3-foot sword looked like a toothpick by default. The monster was closing in, the currents not able to push him fast enough to put more distance between them, so Percy shot downwards and forwards again, allowing the beast to swim past him. Turning around quickly in the water at that speed was difficult for something the size of the shark serpent, and it bellowed again as it struggled to correct its course. The second beast was now in front of him, opening its mouth wide and reaching out with clawed, scaly fingers. Percy shot beneath it, now only feet from the creature's bottom jaw. Pieces of flesh and metal were caught in its crooked and sharp lower teeth, draping over its jaw and dragging through the water. Clearly, this was one of the creatures that had been sent to the battlefields. Did that mean he was close to Atlantis, then? He had no more time to contemplate as he shot upwards, aiming the point of Riptide towards the creature's throat. The blade sunk into the flesh, up to the hilt in the side of the beast's neck, the creature letting out a deafening shriek as the sword struck. It did not die, though, as Percy's blade was small enough that it was likely just an irritation for the large beast. It thrashed its head from side to side, speed slowing as it tried to shake the blade free. The movement caused Percy to lose grip on Riptide's handle and sent him spinning through the water. The demigod quickly regained control of the currents and launched himself further away, as the first serpent had managed to maneuver its way back towards them. He pulled high tide from his neck, the trident growing to full size in his hands in an instant. Until Riptide returned to him, this would have to do. The better reach the trident gave him quickly became an advantage, as he realized he needed to try and stab the shark serpents through the eyes if he wanted a chance to kill them or escape. He propelled himself towards the first creature head-on, the second one still distracted trying to shake Riptide from where it was firmly lodged in its flesh. He stayed level with the monster until he was a few feet from it, then pulled himself upwards. It was smaller and faster than the beast, and Percy knew he had to use that to his advantage. The creature again was not able to keep up with him, and Percy managed to get level with its eye before it could turn its jaws toward him. He slammed the prongs of high tide with all of his might, compelling the water to give it even more force than his bare strength alone. Celestial bronze prongs sank deep into the shark serpent's eyes, black blood exploding outwards around him. The beast let out an earth-shattering roar as it started to dissolve. Percy's heart pounded and ears rang as he pulled high tide back towards him. Pleased with his victory and high on adrenaline, he then remembered the second serpent was still behind him and whipped around just in time to see jaws racing towards him, only feet away. He swung his trident upright, only having a second to brace for impact before the jaws tried to slam shut around him. Percy ducked as teeth approached his head, and his right foot, being gripped with a sudden intense pain, caused him to cry out. The jaws of the massive creature were stopped by high tide, the prongs of his trident stabbing into the roof of the serpent's mouth, and the bottom jaw crushing into both his right foot and the end of his weapon. Black ichor floated around them in the water, mixing with his own bright red blood as the creature threshed and screamed. His right foot had been impaled by a nearly 2-foot-long tooth and was bleeding heavily, the water already tending to heal the wound around the edges. He didn't have a moment to even contemplate what his next move would be when the creature started swimming down at the same pace it had originally approached him. He gripped high tide tightly to avoid being swept away by the incoming flow of water towards the monster's gaping throat ahead of him. A few seconds later, Percy felt them impact the sea floor. The monster had dove headfirst from the ocean floor, smashing Percy underneath it as it did so. The impact hit him flat on his back, forcing all the air out of his lungs and caused him to black out. It seemed he was only out for a couple seconds, but he woke up in excruciating pain. He gasped deeply in the water, almost unable to catch his breath. He saw the creature dissolving around him. He assumed high tide had been driven up through its skull and killed it upon slamming into the ground. His body ached, but he could feel the water already working towards healing him. His right side had taken the brunt of the impact, and in his chest several ribs on that side felt broken. His right shoulder was out of place, though thankfully his leg was no worse off than it was before. Now, free of the obstruction, the water had started to heal the gaping hole in his foot, red streams floating away from the wound into the water around him. Sand from the sea floor shifted through the water as they lay there gasping, desperately trying to hold on to his barely regained consciousness. Percy saw spots in his vision as he blinked sluggishly. He took a few slightly deeper breaths, though not so much as to aggravate his ribs. The ringing in his ears slowly started to fade, though his pulse still pounded against his skull. As his hearing returned, he heard something that caused his rapidly fading adrenaline to spike again. He could hear chanting coming from somewhere around him. It felt ancient and cold and cruel. It was the voice from his dream. His breath became more shallow and rapid, eyes snapping back open and trying to sit up, but finding with a scream of pain that he couldn't. The water was healing him, but it wasn't an instant process. Typically, he would have needed to lay there for at least an hour if he wanted to be fully fixed up with the extent of injuries he had sustained. After surviving and emerging from Tartarus, he had ensured Annabeth was in the hands of the others and had dove into the water, not being able to return to the surface for almost 2 hours, as the water worked to repair what damage it could. But he couldn't now. That voice, it was even more chilling in person than he was in a dream. The words it was speaking were unfamiliar. They sounded older than anything he had ever heard before. It wasn't ancient Greek, and it wasn't Atlantean either. Percy tried again to shift himself somewhat in order to look around, managing to turn his left arm in front of him to push himself up with rather than try and use his core to the broken ribs he was now more than certain he had. He couldn't speak, but he wanted to shout at the being. Percy needed to know who this was. Had something happened to his family? Why didn't the shell take him to Atlantis? He was suddenly awash with the feeling that sent him spiraling back to the Archaean, down in the pit. The sensation caused his eyes to squeeze shut at the onslaught, trying to think back to why this voice was so familiar. But it was growing more difficult to concentrate. Nothing mattered anymore. Why did he need to know who it was? He was so tired. He was in so much pain. He should just die. Lay down and die. It was pure misery. Oh. Misery. His blood ran cold, mind rapidly flickering between different memories of the pit. Annabeth bleeding, her fearful expression as he turned the goddess's poison against her, battling towards the doors, Bob charging His eyes snapped back open as a hand wrapped around his throat, sharp nails digging into his skin and causing him to bleed. It yanked him harshly to his knees, the broken ribs in his chest causing him to gasp. He struggled to bring his left arm up, weakly grasping the wrist holding him. His eyes shot upwards to reveal a face that nearly sent him spiraling in a panic attack. Sunken eyes met his own rage burning deep within them. Her cheeks were scratched and bleeding, dripping golden ichor down and splattering onto her gray tattered dress. Her stringy gray hair was matted on top of her head, and inhumanly sharp teeth were twisted into a snarl. "Do you remember me, Perseus Jackson?" the goddess asked, voice cold and even more ancient than he remembered it to be. She released him suddenly, his hands coming up to catch him and slamming into the ground below as she pushed him downwards. It caused the right shoulder to scream at him, but he clenched his jaws shut so as to not cry out. He panted for a few seconds, drawing ragged gasps through his teeth as he fought to catch his breath. Summoning every ounce of breath he had, he managed to offer a reply. "Achilles," the demigod said, the barely audible whisper not distinguishing the horror in his tone, sharp teeth twisted into a cruel smile. "Good," the goddess of misery said, and suddenly the chanting got louder around him. His eyes shot around, looking for who else could be present, but saw no one. Suddenly, something else drew his attention, the sensation of metal slamming into his wrists and wrapping up his arms. Chains had appeared from seemingly nowhere, silver and glowing softly in the dark water surrounding them. They were inscribed with black sigils that shone as though they were still freshly painted, and seemed to get darker as the chanting grew even louder. Percy could feel his strength leaving him, the water slowing its work to heal his wounds. He thrashed against the chains with everything he had left, but they didn't budge. All he had done was aggravate his shoulder and ribs, leaving him gasping in pain. His mind was sluggish and full of panic. Not entirely sure what to do, he sent out one last desperate call for his father in his mind. "Tell Annabeth I'm sorry," his thoughts finally said. His eyes scattered black spots before him, his eyelids feeling excruciatingly heavy. He couldn't hold himself upright for any longer, and slumped towards the ground, blacking out entirely as his head thudded into the sea floor. And that is the end of chapter 11. This is where shit starts to hit the fan. And I'm glad it does. I'm glad it starts to hit the fan. Anyway. Oh yeah, Halloween's on Wednesday. Woo! Okay, what do I have to yap about this time? Oh, volleyball has been both very fun and an absolute nightmare. So, I've probably mentioned this at some point before, but I play for both my JV and varsity team because I'm a freshman, so they don't want me on just the varsity. I'm assuming that's why anyway, but so basically they have me as a swing player, so I play both. Most of my playtime has come from JV, but I have earned a varsity letter for playing on varsity because I've played enough games on varsity. Um, but sometimes what will happen is the varsity coach will want me to play, or will like not have me play in the JV game so that she can have me play in the varsity game and then not end up playing me in the varsity game so I get even less playtime than I would if I was just on JV. Yeah, it's totally a lot of fun. No, it is a lot of fun when I actually get to play, but I'm still bitter about that because it's happened more than once. Um, Also, we almost had to have a game on Halloween. Luckily, it's not, it's the day before, and that's if we don't win our next two games. Because if we don't win both of the next two games, then we have to play on Thursday to go to districts. But hopefully we beat the two teams because they're both iffy on if we're gonna beat them. Um it'll probably be a closer matchup, but yeah. Um what else am I gonna say? Oh, I have therapy on Thursday. I have my first therapy appointment on Thursday. Yay! It's online, unfortunately. I really wish it could have been in person, but my mom says it's like probably gonna be the perfect person. So I really hope it is. Anyway, I think that's it for today. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you all have a good night or day wherever you are. And I will see you next time.